like we had talked about earlier. Then we have the male sons, which hold a high position compared to female daughter-in-laws. And, in the end, we have the eldest male's granddaughters. So you see, women are positioned, again, in the lowest strata of society. So you know, from these diagrams, you can actually get an understanding of the various class, caste, and gender hierarchies that are prevalent in our society. And so from this, you can understand that even though The Handmaid's Tale is a fictional story, it is of course very much rooted in reality. And these are some things which are very common to both the storyline and the real state of affairs in India and some other countries as well. And of course across the world, especially if you see it from a class perspective, and also the racial prejudice that is widespread in US and other nations as well. Now let's move on to the colonies and the idea of environmental degradation that has been explored in The Handmaid's Tale. So here you can see these pictures basically are of landfills in like India, and these are two pictures which are of the colonies, the yellow regions that we talked about in The Handmaid's Tale. In both the cases, it is pretty evident from the pictures that women are being made to work in these, in these, like in these filthy places, and like here, at least in the, in the series, these shots are from the Tale TV series, the Hulu adaptation, and you can see that women are wearing gloves and these, green, dull green gray kind of clothes to protect them from the radiation, but that is of course not very effective, and they are basically responsible for clearing the toxic waste. And these scenes are of course very shocking and horrifying. But on the parallel level, this is actually happening, and this is happening in India, and it is also true for other third world nations, developing nations. You can see these young girls who are of school going age, who are being made to work in these, you know, filthy areas, these landfills. They're actually rag pickers. They have to collect these waste. They have to segregate them and sell them to some contractors, and they are a part of a vicious cycle of human degradation that is happening. These are, of course, women who are living on the margins, and most of them are from lower castes. And they are not only rag pickers, but they are also manual scavengers, which are people who are made to actually clean the human excreta and are responsible for di- disposing it off in various parts of India. And this shows the scattered nature of their work. These girls are also facing all sorts of problems. They get low wages. You know, they are pushed to the sides of the margins of the society. They also face sexual harassment, and they are completely neglected from the mainstream. I mean, people's view of waste is heavily influenced, like here in India, by the ideas of purity and pollution. And castes have historically that have been involved in waste collection. They have passed on this trait from one generation to another, and the social circumstances and the injustices they face have been passed on from one generation to another as well. Women, on an average, earn half that of men in this kind of work, and so, according to a socio-economic study of Pune, which is a city in India that was conducted by Ocean Conservancy, revealed that 90% of street recycling rag pickers are women, and 25% of them are, either widowed, and 30% are from women-headed households. So, all of them were from non-dominant castes and had not chosen this job out of their own interest. They were forced to do this to feed their families. And this is happening despite the presence of laws that hold all of this to be illegal. And now I will show you a picture of the Ghazipur landfill, which is en route to New Delhi. This is a landfill which is basically present en route to Delhi. If you go to Delhi, which is the capital of India, I myself, being a student, whenever I travel to Delhi, like if in a bus or by traveling by road, this is the site that actually greets me and so many like me who are traveling towards Delhi. This landfill is, of course, a symbol of all that is going wrong when it comes to our waste disposal system in India. And This is not the only landfill. There are, of course, many others as well in and around Delhi and across India. Once in this landfill, there was a blast also, since there is a lot of toxic gases are there inside this kind of mound, and there was a blast in which some workers also died. And this is, of course, a site of great sorrow for all of us. If you look at the river, it is like it has completely turned black, and I mean the air as well is so um, full of smoke, and the whole site is kind of makes you feel choked in a way. And here, like on the behind of this area, there is behind there are some colonies. There are people actually living in this region who are breathing this same air which is there, and this is a modern day reality in a lot of parts of the world, and that too. And from this, you can actually get an understanding of what these colonies would have been like in the Republic of Gilead, and they are in a way inspired by, of course, the Jewish, Nazi concentration camps in Germany, and various labor camps in during the, rule of USSR in Russia, now Russia, but at the same time, you can see that this is also a modern day reality in India and some other nations, third world nations. So now let's move on to environmental movements. Here, in this map, you can see that India has had various environmental movements across the length and breadth of the country. We have had movement against limestone quarrying in Doon Valley, Save the Bhagirathi and Stop Tehri Dam. There have been a lot of movements that have been started to stop the construction of dams. In Gujarat and Ahmedabad, there is a Sardar Sarovar Dam. For this, there was the Narmada Bachao Andolan, which we will be talking about shortly. Then also we have movements by youth and tribal groups that are trying to oppose bauxite mining in these hills. Then movement by tribal groups against some other, nuclear testing. And there are groups opposing nuclear power plant construction. And this just goes to show that we have a long history of participating in environmental movements in India. One of these movements is, of course, the Chipko movement, which actually started in 1973. The Chipko is one of many people's ecological movements due to the greater participation of people in it that have sprung into being over the past 10 to 20 years. These movements are fundamentally different from ecological movements in the industrialized world. And that is because in the industrialized world, the industrial pollution and even development are seen as threats. But these are threats primarily to present ways of living. In the Chipko movement, however, the basic concern is the very survival of the people in the hill areas. Rather than using the media to try to influence government policies, the people here have had to resort to a popular struggle. So these movements are very people oriented, and they are very much rooted to the ideals of sustainability. These are grassroots movements, and when it comes to the Chipko movement, it actually emerged from the idea that like if you hug like if you hug the trees to protect them from being cut, then the government and the authorities would not be able to do anything about it. Therefore, it was tied to the idea of hugging trees in order to protect them from being cut down by authorities. The Chipko resistance is one of the most meaningful social movements to come out of India. It created waves in the 1970s and the 1980s. This is because women played a pivotal role in making it it a success. The real roots of the movement, though, go back to 1730, when a lady called Amrita Devi led the movement to resist from the soldiers who were hell bent on cutting down trees on the orders of the Maharaja of Jodhpur in her native village called Khejarli. As a result, 363 members of the Bishnoi tribe were beheaded. This news actually made the king pass a decree to disallow felling of trees in this area. This shows the value of collective protest and the importance of women in leading local resistance movements like the Chipko movement. But in 1973, as well, a modern movement began in Chamoli, which is in Uttarakhand, that is a state in India. And this movement was also very successful due to the non-violent measures used to express the will of the people. And all these movements were characterized by spontaneous demonstrations and didn't always require leaders. So these were very spontaneous in nature, and women, of course, played a major role in leading them ahead. Now, these are some glimpses of the Narmada Bachao Andolan, which happened in 1985. And this Andolan was basically for, like I said in this map, you can see there is the there in Gujarat there is the Sardar Sarovar Dam. So the building of this dam took a long time, and when it was being built, it actually was intending to, you know, displace like a lot of people from this area. These were poor people, these were villagers who were living on the banks of the river, and their only form of occupation was farming, and for them it was a cause of great worry that this dam was being built, because now they were being displaced for this very reason. And this dam was also causing them a lot of damage in terms of their farming practices and, you know, their daily life. So this lady, who is an Indian social activist, a very popular Indian social activist called Medha Patkar, she was the one who led the struggle, which is the Narmada Bachao Andolan. She got together with the people of this area, and they held various demonstrations all across the region, calling on the authorities to stop the construction of the dam. And they were pretty successful for some time. The World Bank, which was supposed to fund the construction, actually revoked its funding for this thing as well. But later, you know, with a lot of legal cases, the courts of India actually ruled in favor of the government, and the dam was finally made. But it took a long time, and this protest is was largely successful in slowing down the process of doing this. And the major concern was that the people who were being displaced by these by all this, you know, construction, these people were poor people, and they of course didn't have any way to actually come together and express their concerns. So Medha Patkar actually helped in leading them, and she became a voice for their concerns. And these people were not properly rehabilitated. They were not given their due, the due that they were kind of promised by the government. And this was, of course, one of the major environmental movements. And it also was on the lines of nonviolence, and ecofeminism was one of the key practices that were, you know, a highlight in both these movements. If you talk about the Chipko movement and the Narmada Bachao Andolan. Here, now I will be taking you towards some very recent movements that happened in India. In 2019, we had the climate strikes. These strikes happened in India on the call of Greta Thunberg, which is, of course, known throughout the world for her struggle against fighting climate change. And she called on for strikes globally, and these were followed by in India as well. You can see in these pictures, youth from all across India got together and protested and called on the government to take stricter action against climate change. So these are some and like the Fridays for Future, the group that is, I guess, well known in this arena, was also responsible for bringing together so many people. And these protests are, you can see that women, young girls, children are all leading these protests, and it's quite heartening to see this, since they are the future of India. And these strikes happened in 2019. I was also a part of some of them, especially the strikes that happened in New Delhi. And this is a world map which shows the global coverage of the climate strikes. And you can see in India, they have happened almost in all parts of India, and also globally in all parts of the world. This kind of gives you a true collective picture of the concerns that people have for climate change, and especially women. These, these glimpses are from actually the RA forest protests, which happened in Mumbai in 2019-20. So the RA colony protests began on October 5th, 2019, after the Bombay High Court allowed the Mumbai Metro to cut nearly 2,500 trees to build a car shed for the Mumbai Metro. The Mumbai Metro Rail Corporation began to cut down trees in the area merely hours after the High Court order, a move that faced resistance from citizens and environmental activists. These protests also happened fairly recently, and these are, I mean, a few examples of numerous protests that are happening in India, even in Goa, and they are mainly, you know, directed towards the protection of our forests and trees, which are so vital to our ecosystem. This particular forest is, of course, a home to so many endangered species, And even if you cut down 2,500 trees, that that is of course a huge loss to the ecosystem, because as we know, an ecosystem is a very integrated kind of a system where each and every species and each and every part has an important valuable role to play. So so even though they have only cut down 2,500 trees, but each and every tree has a part in this ecosystem, and this cannot be ignored. So all these environmental movements had women in the forefront, women, children, people from all walks of life, from all sorts of backgrounds, and truly these are great examples of collective protest and a culture of environmental protest in India that has been going on since decades. Here it is important to talk about ecofeminism. So, Mary Mellor, a British academic, defines ecofeminism as a movement that sees a connection between the exploitation and degradation of the natural world and the subordination and oppression of women. This is quite true that there is, like I said, a clear connection between the degradation of the natural world and the subordination and oppression of women. And at the same time, Dr. Vandana Shiva, who is a famous environmentalist and from India, whose work is focused on embracing not only the principles of feminism but also the principles of ecology. She sees these two movements as very interconnected and believes that the worldview that causes environmental degradation and injustice is the same worldview that causes a culture of male domination, exploitation, and inequality for women. And these views are quite similar to that of Margaret Atwood and what she was interested in exploring in The Handmaid's Tale. Ecofeminism was in fact first used in the 1980, and it gained popularity in protests and actions against continued ecological disaster. So you see that this was first used in 1980, whereas the kind of protests we talked about, the Chipko movement and the latter ones, happened even way before this term came into practice, and that shows that the kind of environmental movements happening in India were happening even way before these terminologies and practices and came into act. So these are basically very inspiring movements that show that women have actually played a key role in saving our environment. Not only women, various tribes and the indigenous people who have been living in close quarters with nature and are actually dependent on nature for their daily needs. So these are, of course, very important movements. And Shiva and Maria Mies, she explains that we see the devastation of the earth and her beings by the corporate warriors as feminist concerns. It is the same masculinist mentality which would deny us our right to our own bodies and our own sexuality, and which depends on multiple systems of dominance and state power to have its way. This is actually feeding into the idea that when women are denied the right to bodily autonomy, to their own sexuality, to practice their own way of, living, they are in a way being condemned to a life of dominance and power, and dominance and oppression. And same is the case with our environment. If we do not let it be, if we do not let our, if we do not respect our environment, if we don't protect it for what it is, and try to exploit it, and try to take control over it, it will also, be having devastating consequences that are actually happening on Earth. And of course, the kind of economies we have, the kind of the forces of industrialization, urbanization, the flawed practices of modernizing that we are embracing without actually keeping in touch with our old indigenous practices is going to threaten our future and the future of our planet. Here I will be talking about sexual surveillance and reproductive rights. Sexual surveillance basically means that it basically has to do with greater control over women's bodies and their existence, whereas reproductive rights has to do with how much freedom women have to, to choose whether they want to give birth or not, and how much freedom they have, and that freedom has to come from not only the people who are there in their family, but also from the society. How we treat our women, how we let them make important family decisions about themselves, about how they are going to raise their children, whether they are ready to raise their children or even have children in the first place, and how we also project the female body in media, in and especially on social media these days. This is a case study from a region called Bid in Maharashtra. Bid is a small town, district, or a village, you can say, where over 13,000 female sugarcane workers have gone through a uterus removal surgery, and that is according to a probe panel, a committee which was set up after it was reported that hundreds of women were undergoing hysterectomy, which is the removal of uterus via surgical methods, just to avoid loss of daily wages. Because having a uterus, is akin to, of course, having your periods and menstruation, and also you're getting pregnant. So these women believed that getting their uterus removed would actually save them a lot of time. They will be able to work for longer hours in in the farms as sugarcane workers, and this will avoid them any loss of daily wage. Most of these women are in the age group of 35 to 40, while a small section under 25 too have gone through this procedure. So some of the reasons for this are actually early marriages, lack of awareness on women's health issues, poverty, lack of pre and post-operative counseling, water scarcity, and absence of menstrual hygiene and toilets that have been told by the committee as the causes for the mass-scale hysterectomies in this area. And but on the other hand, there are some other pretty complex reasons as well behind this why women are choosing to do this. You know, women are becoming wombless whether voluntarily or coerced for two main reasons. And I think there is a the coercion actually plays a greater impact, like a greater role in this, because women are often forced by their circumstances, environment surrounding, structural the inequalities that are present in the society to to take up such kind of choices, to make such choices in their life. Often they do not have a choice. They are not in control of their choices. The first is that doctors are actually kind of using them to exploit them. They are scaring them into believing that these surgeries are required, and therefore they are trying to turn it into a profit. The second could be because of a perception that menstruation hinders work, and we have to take into account the geographical surroundings as well, because Bede is a drought prone area where sugarcane cutting is the main source of income. So women have this as their sole reason for employment, and they have to make sure that they do this work as properly as they can. Field work is of course very rigorous and requires the strength of your upper body, and like in this practice of farming, you see that the cane is cut and it is tied together, and these women are responsible for carrying the loads on their heads. So if they have to take a break to urinate, they usually do it in the fields, because longer breaks may incur a fine. And same is the case if they have to menstruate, they might not be in a position to do these long hours of backbreaking work. Several women who undergo hysterectomies do so to become employable by contractors or more productive in their fields. And these have been some reports on this issue. And this goes to show that how your surroundings, your environments, the opportunities you get in life, your position in the society, the access to resources, all of these things play a very major role in uh, in the quality of your life. And these women are, of course, they have to do this since they do not have a choice, and they are, of course, causing their body great harm. It can lead to multiple infections, and it is very, very shocking yet disturbing that these kind of practices are happening in India. And this is, of course, only one case which I'm talking about. There could be so many of others. Also, here we need to understand that women in India do not have a lot of say in whether they want to engage in whether they want to have a baby or not. They are expected to fulfill their gender roles, their social roles, even if they have a career in front of them, and that is true for even women who are well educated. So this whole argument that if you gain more access to education, if more women are like if more women are going to schools, they are learning, they are studying, they will be able to come out of these vicious cycles. But in reality, even access to education does not guarantee a life free from sexual surveillance and reproductive rights. And that's because even in the urban areas and even higher class societies, women are strictly not allowed to actually freely do whatever they want, and they still have they still have to uh, try to hold whatever the The rules are there in the families. They are supposed to obey them, and if a woman is not doing that, she might be shunned, or her character might be questioned. Whereas that is not the case, of course, for men. And yeah, it's true that men also have their share of challenges in life, but of course, when it comes to these critical elements, women have seen worse, and they are seeing worse. So with this, we got an understanding of sexual surveillance and reproductive rights. Also, in women, there, like in India, sorry, there is a culture of not talking about sex education, and this creates a lot of problem. Even when it comes to women's safety, women are not able to safely move from one place to another. There's a lot of problem with freedom of transportation, transporting safely from one place to another, and women are also subjective to a lot of sexual harassment in India. And at the same time, this is true at all levels, whether it is at the high class level or even in the lower class level, on each level, irrespective of where you are on the social ladder. But of course, at lower levels, you are more exposed to these kind of issues. With this, let's move on to the Gender and Climate Change Survey. So I had conducted this survey to understand the, the awareness level and the kind of experiences people have about climate change. And the respondents were, of course, ranging between the age group of 18 to 40. They are from different parts of, like the country. And the survey had consisted of open-ended and closed-ended questions of various themes. So here are some findings from the survey. Around 79.3% respondents were female and 17.6% male, whereas 2.9% actually didn't really want to they didn't want to talk about their gender, and we have called them as non-binary. 100% respondents believe that climate change is happening in India. This goes to show the great concern that people have, and the kind of the kind of events they can see around them that are happening in the name of climate change. Around 38% believe that climate change affects men and women differently, and the remaining either disagree or are not sure about this. This shows that, of course, there is a lot of lack of awareness when it comes to how climate change may affect men and women differently. Since this problem is not even taught at school level or even at the graduate level. Um, we do have a lot of classes on environmental science, but these issues are not really talked about. They are not in the syllabus. And if you're actually interested in understanding them, you may have to find some other sources of study. So this is not a part of our mainstream curriculum, and that is, of course, a cause of concern. Because if we do not teach the younger generation, like about how climate change, has various effects, pertaining to your gender, caste, class, position in a society, how can we actually devise proper climate policies and ensure that these young people who actually go on to become the leaders of the nation would, pay more attention to these issues? So this is a major point in question. And then we have 32% of the people that agree that women, children, and elderly may be more vulnerable to climate change, whereas 47% remain unsure. This, in effect, adds to the previous point that yes, there needs to be more awareness on this issue. Some of the reasons that were given by those in agreement that women, children, and the elderly are more vulnerable to the effects of climate change are showcased here. So these reasons are, of course, very interesting. First is that males tend to receive the privileges of not being a housemaker, which includes a tiring job of fetching water from far off regions and standing in rows when the well waters have dried up due to climate change. There have been various research studies that have thrown light on this fact that women, like we had talked about the triple burden earlier, women have the triple burden. They are not only doing the paid work, but also doing the household work, which is not paid. And in rural areas, this household work also includes fetching water from far off areas. And this is, of course, a very tiring journey that women have to undertake, whether they are in whether they are in the hilly areas or in the desert areas and plains. They have to carry water for long hours, and when sometimes they reach the well, they find that this well has dried up, and then they have to walk even longer. So this puts them at a disadvantage, whereas this kind of problem may not be faced by men. And then women have to do household chores, cook, clean, and shop in harsh climates. Society expects too much from them, even in troubling times. This is another point towards the triple burden that we talked about. And then there is the same time pregnant women are also adversely affected due to the deteriorated climate and environment. This is very true. Even in the book, The Handmaid's Tale, it was talked about that environmental degradation and these issues will lead to decline in fertility as well. And there are various research studies which show that the problems of air pollution can actually affect pregnant women, and these air particles can enter their wombs and also lead to various serious problems in pregnancies and deformities as well. Then droughts and floods have greater impact on women as it becomes difficult to collect food and water. When there is a flood or a drought, women are of course the ones who have to face the problem of having for finding food and water, because they are the ones who are responsible for feeding the family. And in this case, many women are not encouraged. Like in some research studies, it has been said that many women are not encouraged to learn how to swim. So this lack of training in swimming may also, and some of these life skills, if not, if they are not taught to women, this puts them at a very disadvantaged position as well when there is a drought or a flood. Generally, in times of crisis, women, children, elderly people find it difficult to translocate. Many lose their lives in this process, and that's true since mobility is also a big challenge for women, children, and uh, the older generation. They might not be able to travel in time, and they might not be able to travel or even find any transport, may not even know how to drive. And these are the reasons why they would be left behind or would not be able to save themselves. Children and the elderly suffer more from pollution because their immunity power is not as strong as the youth. This is, of course, true. There are physical and biological differences which may put them at a disproportionate and disadvantaged level. And all these reasons are very much rooted in reality, and they have been observed through various research studies. And these have been looked upon, whenever there's a climate disaster like a flood or even a drought. These are the kind of key problems that have come up time and again. The respondents that disagreed were actually unable to provide any logical reasons for doing so. They often stressed that climate change affects everyone equally, irrespective of the generation, sex, or physical mental status. Some believed that climate is same everywhere, therefore the impacts of the changes should be same too. This is, of course, climate is not the same everywhere. Climate is very different, and also the kind of impact it has is very different for various regions. The kind of impact it is having in the developing world is not the kind of impact it will have in the developed world. And these are some key differences that we need to understand. Then 88% respondents believe that the Indian government does not have a strong policy for combating climate change. Rest are worried about the implementation as it hasn't been effective as per them. More than half believe that current political leaders are not mindful of environmental issues. This shows, of course, the status of how the governments and the political leaders in India, how much they are really concerned about the climate and how much they are able to build, confidence in people that they are working on these issues, they are trying to solve them. And 80% of the respondents had personally been impacted by climate change through heat waves, air pollution, floods, and so this shows how serious the problem is and how it has impacted people from all across India. More than half of the respondents deem it necessary to include the following elements in climate-related policies, which are gender considerations, the introduction of safeguards to prevent habitat destruction, community-centric approaches for adaptation and mitigation, class caste considerations, holistic ecofeminism approaches in disaster management. So, from all this discussion, now you may be thinking that is there a solution? Can we do anything about all this? Well, yes, there are so many things that we can do. First of all, we need staunch environmental policies. We also need better access to education, healthcare, and employment for youth, especially young girls. We need greater investment in renewable energy. We also need that the voices and concerns of the tribal, indigenous, and disadvantaged groups need to be brought to the forefront and amplified. We need to realize our individual responsibilities towards the planet. And we have to stress more on awareness, awareness, and more awareness. We also have to make sure that all the policies that we are making or really advocating for are done in a manner that first there should be proper discussion with various stakeholders, and then only these policies should be implemented. We have to act locally to actually achieve the global goals, all the sustainable development goals that have been outlined by the United Nations. We have to develop grassroots models of sustainable development, bring in some sustainable economic policies, and of course, decarbonize the economies and develop alternative eco-friendly means of transport. But here I would like to add that we should not decarbonize the economy the way they were doing it in the Republic of Gilead by actually oppressing people and trying to put stricter controls on them. Instead, our decarbonization process should be people friendly. It should take into consideration the problems, the concerns, and that should be different for each and every society. It has to really see it from a practical perspective and not just be from a theoretical perspective. We have to create a decarbonization plan that takes into consideration all sorts of aspects from gender, class, caste, and also the 11th point here we are talking about using public transport, carpooling, cycling more often. These are things which of course we must do, and we have to make sure that these are not things that are just said but actually acted upon. We have to buy clothing in a very morally. We have to think about this aspect because you and I, we might be wearing clothes that have been not made up of sustainable fabrics, or not or the people who have made them in the factories might be going on through some problems in terms of the kind of conditions that they are working under. So we have to look at this from a very moral perspective. We have to let go of fast fashion and switch to sustainable brands. And nowadays there is emergence of a lot of thrift stores and some spaces online which are moving towards this whole idea of sustainable fashion, and and that is really a very good thing. That is a welcome change. We also have to make sure that there are better monitoring systems that gauge the progress in real time, and for this, data collection and data sharing is extremely important. And people like especially in research, we need to have access to better data so that we can actually work on these issues and find some proper solutions. Strict governance and laws to stop environmental degradation is extremely important. We have to develop strict implementation plans for all our environmental laws and policies. We have to actually inculcate environmental ethics every step of the way and let go of the use and throw culture as we know it. We must go back to the basics and follow the given 5 Rs, which is reduce, reuse, refuse, recover, and recycle, and get involved and help communities adapt to climate change. And yes, so much more can be done, but we need to act now, or it will be too late. These two pictures are of two young girls from India who have been working for protecting their environment, their surroundings. In the first picture, you can see a 5-year-old girl named Jannat, who is on a mission to clean the iconic Dal Lake in Srinagar along with her father. And in the second picture, we have Ridhima Pandey, an 11-year-old environmentalist from Haridwar, who is leading a revolution fighting against this brutal damage and questioning the government over their inability and failing at protecting our environment. Ridhima is actually called the Indian Greta Thunberg, and she has been very instrumental in actually voicing out her opinions. And these stories, these individual actions, are of course a source of great pride and a lot of inspiration for, and should be for all of us, since sometimes even a small change can actually create a ripple, and the world can surely change if these small children and these small girls can take a decision to do something about their environment. Then so can the corporations and the leaders who have so much of access to do these kind of to take up these initiatives at their disposal. So these two pictures and these two girls are a great source of hope, and especially the youth of India and of course the world is a great source of hope for taking this movement forward, and working towards creating a more sustainable and better future. But not only the youth, people from all walks of life, from all backgrounds, have to have to take into have to take some action. We all have to get involved. There is only a community way of doing this that will be actually effective, and for this we need to actually empower each other, and that too irrespective of our gender, caste, or class differences. With this, I would like to recite a poem that I had written about the Handmaid's Tale. And this poem was actually written when I actually watched that show and I read the book. I was deeply inspired by it. So here I go. So it's called Made in Crimson. Red and white. I see a woman in red, a woman who bled, a woman on the street, stuffed in a cape. She had a story before she escaped. A maiden, they say, running in the woods, settling for nothing but vengeance. A handmaid she is, she behaves, sometimes not like one, like hundreds of hers marching in unison, knowing that their best season is yet to come. The fall of the patriarchy is yet to stun. This maid is not like any other, she has a plan. To betray her masters, she is nothing but the queen of disasters. Blessed be her fruit, may the Lord open, and acknowledge the sins of the sinners. May the fruit of Gilead turn out to be barren. Offred is her name, Glen is her friend. These women had real names, they were in love with real women. In her story, there are no survivors, there are women of steel, sisters in crimson capes, wearing our future. If violence against women remains unaddressed, you could be an Offred and I an Glen. The times are not better, they could turn worse. We have to come together. Fear breeds intolerance. A woman is not a slave. This is a handmaid's tale. Her womb is a basket for fruits eaten by the rich, given to the cruel. Her respect is reduced to a rat. A woman she is, but is never made to feel like that. A puppet pulled by strings in the society for the society. As she builds an army of crimson-caped women, striving for a world before hers came shattering down. I see a woman, I am her. I wish I don't become what they made her to be. A woman who cannot breathe unless told to, who cannot work unless asked to. I see them in crimson capes as I relate to the fear in their movement, their quick steps, their hushed voices, their covered breasts, their organized expressions. As the darkness comes, they turn into these different creatures, wary of their surroundings. Is the handmaid of tomorrow, ask women today? In a time when Me Too echoes, I remember the opening scene as she runs through the woods with her child, leaving her life behind like a rat in a maze, free to run as long as it remains in the maze. Individualism is their goal, independence is their right. Striving for this, it could never be so hard. But this place has rules not everyone can break. Broken are never forgiven. The strongest do not remain for long. They do not know their end. Their beginning almost seems unreal. Their capes are waiting to be torn. Their dreams are waiting to turn into reality. These women are not extraordinary. Their lives are. Their words are. Their story is yours. You might be living it right now. All these women are waiting until one rises. In the name of gender, in the name of caste, in the name of color, in the name of age, wearing their own specific chosen capes, colored in varied hues, marching towards a better future, where a woman or a man or anyone with a heart can walk through the darkness, through the light, remembering pain but not causing it, realizing that better does not mean better for everyone. And under his eye, we all are same. Under her eye, we all are equal. On this planet, red and white should not become our story. A handmaid's tale deserves a world of such realities, till her army of crimson is alive, together like us, in the spirit of great revolution, where we are not wearing crimson, but courage as a symbol of our strength. With this, I would like to conclude my presentation. Through this study, we understood the gendered impact of climate change in context to India. We also explored this problem from the Handmaid's Tale's perspective. We compared the fictional and real life situations prevailing in Gilead and in our world today. The experiences of Indian women and their concerns about climate crises were also addressed by virtue of the survey. It needs to be stressed that Gilead is a fictional society and fundamentally different from India in many ways. The present study is purely speculative and isn't aimed at generalizing or offending any particular community or individual. The given analysis is purely subjective and therefore it advocates for gender equality in climate action. Due to the presenter's own experiences, my own experiences, observations, and concerns as a young Indian woman growing up in a developing nation who wants to have a more sustainable future for her community and its people. I would like to end by providing some strategies which should be incorporated in climate change policies. We need to make sure that there is gender sensitive climate planning. This has to evolve strategies that can help women in immediate crisis as well as long term. Gender mainstreaming is also required in the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, policies, conferences, and reports on climate change. We need practical solutions that cater to women from all backgrounds in all countries across the world. Policymakers will play a key role in bringing communities together at local, national, and global level. We also need to tackle issues of gender commute gap, lack of safe mobility, lack of safety, sexual violence, and gender pay gap. We also need to talk about the success stories that are there around us and try to replicate them wherever possible. With this, I would like to extend my gratitude to everyone at Trinity History Con 3.0, the Long Room Hub, Trinity College Dublin, for giving me this wonderful opportunity. I would also like to thank everyone who participated in the survey on gender and climate change, and also my college, Indraprastha College for Women, University of Delhi. I would like to extend my gratitude to all of you in the audience for making it this far in the presentation, and all the scholars I have quoted in my study. With this, thank you so much for hearing me out.